Alright, in this video we're going to talk about three things: loops, conditionals, and switches. So we'll start with loops, and loops basically allow you to run a block of code and execute tasks as long as a certain condition is true, and it'll repeat that task until the condition is true. Alright, so let's do a really simple example. And there's basically two types of loops we'll be going over. It's the for loop and the while loop. So for a for loop, we're going to go ahead and use the for keyword, open up some parentheses, and in here we're going to have three parameters. The first is going to be a declaration of the variable we're going to use within the loop. We're going to call it I, and we want to set it to 0. Okay, we want to separate these parameters with a semicolon. The next is going to be the condition. So let's say as long as I is less than 10, semicolon. And then the last will be just an increment. We want to say I++, and that's just going to increment whatever I is by 1. So in here, all we need to do, or all we want to do, is just console log I. Okay, so let's go over it again. We're setting a variable I to 0. We're saying as long as it's less than 10, then we want to run whatever is in here. And we're going to increment it by 1 after every time it runs. Alright, so if we save and we go and reload, you'll see that down here console logs 1 through 9. Okay, the reason it went to 9 is because the condition is if it's less than 10. Once it hits 10, it's no longer less than 10, so it cuts off. It's not going to keep going. Alright, if we were to change the condition to less than or equal to 10 and reload, you can see now 10 is included because that's part of the condition. Now we're going to work more on for loops, but before that I just want to show you the while loop, which is very similar. Okay, so I'll show you how to do the same exact thing. So we're going to say while, and then all we want to put in here is the condition. So we'll say while I is less than 10, and then in here we want to console.log I, and then we do the increment in here as well, so we'll say I++. Alright, and then what I'm going to do, is comment this out. Okay, we'll run that, and let's see, I is not defined. Okay, so I actually has to be defined outside of it, so we'll say var I equals 0. Okay, so the main difference is when you declare the variable, you're doing it outside of the while loop, and then you're incrementing it from within here, not within the parameters. Alright, so let's go ahead and comment that out too. And next I want to do another for loop, but I want to use a for loop to loop through an array. Alright, so let's say var people. Okay, we'll create an array of people's names. Say Bob, Frank, Sally, and Mike. Okay, so we have this array of people's names. And all we want to do is print these out. Okay, just like we do with the numbers, we want to print out these names. So we'll say for. Same thing, we're going to say I equals, actually we should be doing var I equals 0. And then we'll say as long as I is less than people dot length. Okay, remember, an array is an object, and an object has a length property. Okay, in this case would be 4. So we're basically saying as long as I is less than 4, and then we'll increment, and then down here what we want to do is just console.log people and then I. So now if we go and we run that, you can see that the names are now being printed out down here. Now we can also do this with objects or an array of objects. So I'm going to bring my comment down, and then we'll create a variable called people again, except this time it'll be objects. So we'll just do name Bob, and let's also give him an age. So age 40, Okay, and then we'll say Frank 30. Sally will say 25. And then Mike will say 34. Alright, so we have this array of objects. And then what we want to do is the same thing we did up here. I'm just going to grab this for loop. Okay, except we want to get the name property. So right here we're just going to do .name, reload, and you can see we get the names. If we want to get the age, we can do that as well. And you can see we get a list of all the ages. Now, you most likely won't want to just console log this stuff. You'll want to output it into the browser. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First thing we're going to do is create a variable called output, and I'm just going to set it to just to an empty string right now. Alright, and then in our for loop, let's go ahead and get rid of this. In our for loop, we're going to say document dot get element by ID. Okay, and we need to create an element to insert it in. So up here, let's create a div. Or actually, let's make it a UL, and we'll give it an ID of people. Okay, so now down here, we want to get the element with the ID of people, and then we're going to say dot inner HTML, and we want to append to this. We don't want to just set equals, because that'll replace it. We want to append, so we can do that with plus equals. Alright, so we're going to say plus equals, and let's make it an LI, and then inside the LI, I want the name and the age. So let's go ahead and concatenate here, people I.name, concatenate, and let's see, we'll put a dash, and then we need to concatenate again the age, and that should do it. So let's save it, reload, and now you can see we have an unordered list here with the name and the age of each person in that array. Alright, so that is the for and while loop. Now we're going to take a look at if statements, and if you've worked with other programming languages, you probably already know some of this stuff. I'm just going to comment this out. Alright, so what we'll do here is let's create a variable called x, and we'll set it to 25. Actually, let's set it to something lower, say 10. And then we'll create another variable called y, and we'll set it to 15. And then we're going to do a simple if statement. We're going to say if x is less than y. Okay, so if x is less than y, then we want to do something. What we want to do for now is just console log, and we'll just put in x, and let's concatenate here. Say x is less than, and then we can concatenate y. Like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and run that, and down here, 10 is less than 15. Alright, so let's do an else. Then I'll just copy this. So we know if it's else, then x is going to be more than y, right? So even if I reload, it's going to stay the same, but if I go and I change 10 to 20 and then reload, now it says 20 is more than 15, so it's now running this. Now there's one other outcome that we can have, and that's equal to. So if we set these both to 20, reload, we get 20 is more than 20, which doesn't really make sense. Alright, so what we want to do is add an else if in this situation. So right here, let's say else if, and then in here we'll say x is equal to y. Alright, and then we'll console log, and we'll just say x is equal to y. So now if we reload, we get 20 is equal to 20. Okay, if we were to change that, we get 25 is more than 20. If we were to change this to something higher, we get 25 is less than 30. So every situation is now covered with this if-else statement. Now you can also use other operators in here, and you can do more than one thing too. So let's say we have another variable called z, and we'll set that to 10. Okay, so in here we want to say if x is less than y and z is equal to 10. Okay, so both of these have to be true in order for this to run. Okay, and if we reload, let's actually change this a little. We'll say and z is 10. Okay, and you can see we're getting that because x is greater than y. X is less than y, and z is equal to 10. If I change this to, let's change that to 14, it's not going to work. Okay. So you can also do OR, and OR would be two pipe characters like that. So in this case, this would only be true if x was less than y, or if z is equal to 10. Okay, so it doesn't have to be both, it can just be one. Alright, so next thing I want to look at is a switch statement. So let's comment this out. And what we'll do is we'll create a name, and we're going to set it to the string Joe. Okay, and then what we'll do is have a switch, and that switch is going to take in that name. Okay, it's going to check on that name, and then we're going to create a couple cases for it. So let's say case Joe. I'm going to put a colon there, and then what we want to happen. So we'll just do console log. We'll say my name is Joe, and then we need to break. Okay, whenever we finish with a case, we want to break. Let's say Jeff break, and we'll do one more name. Let's say Jack. Alright, so if we go and we run this, you can see we get my name is Joe. If we were to change name to Jeff, reload, we get my name is Jeff. If we were to change it to, let's say, Adam, and reload, nothing happens. Okay, so in this case, what we want to do is set a default. So we'll say default, and let's do console.log, and we'll say my name is, and then we'll just concatenate on the name variable up at the top, and then break. So now if we reload, we're going to get my name is Adam, okay, because that's in the default. Alright, so we're going to stop here. That is loops, conditionals, and switches.